Gentlemen, it's good to be with you today on Zoom. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Why are we doing Zoom again?
I don't know, Brad. Tell us why we're doing Zoom.
I'm in California.
Yeah?
Oh.
Yeah,
How is it?
It's good. I'm moving my daughter into college, so it's been a whirlwind, but coming back in a few days. So.
Did you guys drive or fly?
Oh no, we flew.
Okay. I didn't know if you let her have a car out there or not.
No, she doesn't have a car out here right now, but she's only here for 4 months, and then she comes back for the summer before the fall. So
Yeah. Well, how are you feeling about that, Dad? You okay?
Yeah. So far, so good. I don't know. We'll see in a couple of days when I leave how I feel.
I didn't know that's why you were out there.
What's that?
I didn't know you were out there for that reason. I thought you were taking a vacation.
No. I don't take vacations.
Yeah, I thought that.
I thought
it was odd.
No, I'm not in Bali. I'm not in Bali on my surf trip right now.
Brad's always in California for some reason, but he never takes a vacation.
Yeah.
Actually, today I think later we're going to go down to the beach, so that'd be fun. That's fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good. Well, guys, there's a lot going on, and I thought we could talk today a little bit about disruption because in the news in this week, 1 week alone, we've had a couple of pretty interesting, some would call hiccups, some would call disruption, some would call revolution. You've got Tim Cook and Mr. Zuckerberg going at it, and predictions have been made. This could be the end of Facebook as we know it. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then the whole GameStop, what's going on with Twitter, and the people have said that Wall Street is breaking and it's broken, and there's lots of controversy around that. So I think both those things are going to impact us as marketers in some way or another, good, bad, and different. And I want to talk about that today. And I know, Brad, you're the resident investment guru in this little triangle. So I'm gonna defer to you, and I think we should start before we get into the whole Apple Facebook thing. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on what you're seeing on Wall Street for those listening that don't even understand or even know or have a good grasp. Can you just kind of give us the 100-foot view of what's happening?
Well, you have all these new investors that are using apps like Robinhood, and a lot of young millennials that are coming into the game, the investment game, and I think it's a different mindset for sure for younger folks. I think they want to do what they feel is right, and so there's a Reddit forum called Wall Street Bets, and they've been around for a while, and they got together and decided that they were fed up with these big hedge funds that were putting these shorts on these companies to watch them fail and make money off of them while they fail. So they got together and created a virtual coalition to stop it by taking these companies who have heavily shorted these hedge funds who have heavily shorted these companies and actually raise the stock to the point where they actually had to buy in because of the expiration. So which cost these hedge funds billions of dollars. And really of losses, and it's been fun, kind of interesting and fun to watch. At the same time, I'm a novice investor, but I invest, on a daily basis, weekly basis. I'm probably trading stock or doing something in cryptocurrency or doing something kind of interesting. So I keep an eye on it, but it's it's kind of amazing that these guys on Reddit actually flipped, Wall Street on its head. And
I think that is so amazing. It's just, hey, by the way, did you own any GameStop?
I don't own any GameStop. The only stock that I own that they pumped up a little bit was Nokia.
Okay.
Yeah, and I own some, and then some of the folks actually started to pump up Dogecoin, which is a crypto altcoin cryptocurrency, and I own a little bit of that. So, I
just think it's really interesting to see. As disruptive and challenging as it is, I think the reason why I think it's ultimately good is I think it displays a little bit of a balance of power, and I think a balance of power and tension is important in most societies. And we always think about it as government versus people, and that being out of whack. But I think companies, versus people, or brands versus consumers, or platforms versus individuals, all of those things have to be in balance to have a good, I guess, a good, healthy running society. And I don't know, for a while it seems like they've gotten out of balance. Or that's really, it sounds like what is actually spawning a lot of this. And to see something like that, work, I think is kind of interesting and amazing in a certain way.
It's interesting because Robinhood stopped trading. In fact, I got a message because I don't use the Robinhood platform for my main trading, but I do have an account, and I've tested it before, so I bought a little bit of stocks and stuff in it, and I've got an email that says that they're limiting a lot of these trading to these stocks like GameStop, where you can only buy one share, and so it's creating a big pushback to the point where I'm really nervous that, I think Robinhood is probably done. It's like, their major audience is being left behind, and it's from that perspective. And
they purport their brand as like being this disruptive brand, right? Like for the little guy. And you're right. Yeah.
And so we'll see, there's a lot of this stuff going on. It's like, the same thing with Facebook. I know we talked about this even last fall, when all of a sudden one of our ad accounts got shut down on Facebook, and there's no rhyme or reason. And after 3 weeks and finally getting it back on, they said, "Oh, sorry, it was a mistake." It's like, we are we are out of control when it comes to using these platforms. We're under their control. And if they decide to do something, they're going to do it. It's not our Facebook. I don't own Facebook. My stuff on Facebook isn't mine. And my stuff on Robinhood isn't mine. It can be shut down. It can be stopped. I don't have control. And it's like, you get to the point where you get kind of tired of that. And I think that's where, like, for instance, for financial reasons, I think people are really looking for a very decentralized way to trade. So I think that's why cryptocurrency specifically could be a really good option for people down the road in the blockchain. And that's whole new tech, that's technology we could talk forever about, but those things where we don't have a company that can just shut us down anytime they want to for anything. And that's going to change the way that we communicate to each other. That's going to change the way that the platforms that we're going to be on in the future. But it also changes our business, which, the advertising business. We talked a little bit offline, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about, this. You mentioned it about the war between Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg, and that whole thing. And what does that mean for us? Like, what does that mean for advertisers? And what does that mean for the general public and the public's privacy? And so there's a lot there we can talk about for sure.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. Ultimately, high level, yes, disruption is good and change is good, and I've seen a lot over the years. But I think in this instance, definitely Wall Street needs to be changed in a lot of ways. But in any disruption like this, I think what you get is fallout. And I feel for the people that are jumping on board, and all these new investors, all these grandmas, all these kids taking their parents' funds and, having a lot of money, making a lot of money quickly. And yet that stock will bounce, and it will eventually go back down to some degree. And so, there's a lot of people that are going to get hurt that weren't hedge fund owners and other things like that. And I also think too that during this period of disruption, while Wall Street changes, it'll affect everyone's economy and everybody's business and livelihood to some degree. So that's just part of disruption. So I think it's an interesting sociological perspective. I think just long term or short term. The other side of the coin is, as far as Robinhood, we've talked about this, and I think later in the show we'll get more into it, but the whole concept of these platforms changing and going away and maybe not being there and diversifying, I have a feeling that this has nothing to do with Robinhood's being controlled by anybody other than just, as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, I have a suspect. In reading about it, I think maybe they weren't ready for this. And as I understand, Brad, that these companies that do these micro stocks and partial investments for smaller amounts, they have to front X amount and have cash in the bank on all these big trades. So I suspect this was more of a liquidity issue than anything else, meaning all of a sudden they turned around and they needed to have, X amount of millions or billions of dollars in the bank as due to what they did, and they couldn't do anything else. They had to shut down, right?
Yeah, they say their clearinghouse contacted them at 3:30 in the morning, and they funded like another, couple $billion just to fund all of this trading. So that's what they're saying. That's the reason they shut this down. It obviously looks different from the opposite side.
Yeah, of course. People getting hurt either way. But my point is, and I'll wind this down as we kind of lead into how it might affect our agency, is at the other end of these platforms are just people and businesses. And what you're betting on is that they're running their business right, that they are prepared for anything, that they're always going to be there, and that no one's going to let them sink. And all of those presuppositions are false, in my opinion. You don't know who's behind it. First of all, people, you don't know if their business is healthy. You can have a good idea, but in this instance, who was sitting there thinking, before I invest my money in Robinhood, this is the only money I have had. I've saved up for 25 years. I'm going to make sure that they are, if they get a run on their money or something happens, that they have enough liquidity. I don't think most people think that way. And that's why I think as agency owners, as marketers, we have to be in the position to think that way on behalf of our clients and to offer diversification and diversity in these cases. So as it pertains to Facebook or Instagram or, maybe a type of email service or a type of code or platform that you're using. If any of those elements are out of your control, under someone else's control and business practices, I don't think we're doing our clients any favors by not informing them of that, planning for it, and being diverse in it. So I'll stop there and throw it back to you guys.
I completely agree. I think that it's a constant challenge. So I look at nothing's really changed except that now, I don't know, there's the mentality or some of the environment seems to have changed over the last couple of years. But we've all always been kind of subject to different platforms or different companies for forever, right? That's always been the case. And then you see these cycles, and unionizing was kind of one of those types of cycles, back in the day, and now there's like a different version of that kind of thing happening in a different way. But I feel like there's always this kind of cycle happening and up and down. I don't think you can control everything. Obviously. And, I know I've learned in business, especially since last year, I was just like you guys, I've learned to let go of a lot of the trying to control a lot of stuff. And I know we talked faith and that kind of stuff in the past, but that comes into it. Like if you have, if there's something greater and someone greater that you believe is like kind of guiding your life, then it's easier to do that. If you don't, then it's harder to do that. But I do think that kind of has played into it for me. But when you get down to the other side of it, there's letting go, I think, for your own health and mindset and that kind of thing to a certain degree. But then there's, the strategic, tactical, like how do I do the best with the things I can control? And I do think that last year, we talk about this with our clients, and I talk about this in our business. I think diversification is key, like you said, Bob, and we've seen that. In this past year's kind of showed that to us. I don't think I think in every way, right? Like, I remember at the beginning of the sort of 2020 thing, I had a concern that there was going to be a run on the banks when the market was crashing. And so then, that kind of FDIC, insured limit never really didn't seem anything like I need, much to me as far as practically speaking. And all of a sudden I started looking at like, well, is the money that we have under our control distributed in the right places so that we actually, might be as protected as possible. You started to see it with a lot of those things. I think the things that we've sort of taken for granted and maybe just depended on for no reason have been called into question. And that's happening, seems like more and more. Maybe that's not true, but it just seems the perception is, that's happening in a bunch of different places. And so what I would say is I think one of the big takeaways that we're implementing is diversify. And I mean, maybe diversify is the action, but a step above it, which is probably just as important, if you can't take the action to diversify something, is being aware of where you're vulnerable, like where you're dependent on one thing, where there's a single point of failure. So like in the finances side of things, it's structurally like bank accounts and allocation of cash versus other things. I think when it comes to trading platforms, like you, Brad, I'm not like you actually. I am much more amateur, but I have I do trading and I'm interested in all that, and I do some investing and that kind of thing. And I have probably 4 or 5 different accounts with some of these different platforms. I have a Robinhood account, but I've never really depended much on them for whatever reason. Maybe I'm just like old school, but you have these different areas, so you can kind of adjust. You diversify enough to where you can pivot if you need to. I think when it comes to business, I think that's kind of the same thing. I know we've talked a lot about payment processing in the past, like how I believe every service business should be doing electronic payments. But that calls into question, now there's another single point of failure, which is your credit card processor or your merchant account. And, if that gets paused or shut down or something happens, and it can happen because of nothing that you did, then your ability to process payments is halted. And so, we actually have several of those, and we've never even had to pivot to them, but we've got redundancies there. Because in my head, I'm thinking, okay, now that we're here, there's a lot of pros, but there's some cons, and we need to be aware of what those are.
When these big organizations, or like even the Robinhood thing, does that bring you guys more skepticism in the future, you think, to like certain platforms? Like, can you get so big that you fail because you're so big?
In my opinion, I think that these things are healthy right now, in my opinion, because I do think platforms have, I'm not sure exactly why. I think it seems to have accelerated in the last 9 months, but I think platforms have gotten to the point where they feel above, it feels like above the law in a lot of ways, but I'm not saying that it's from a legal standpoint. But to your point, we all depend heavily on Facebook for a lot of our advertising dollars, yet, and we've spent millions and millions a month with Facebook. And when someone gets shut off, we have literally zero pull.
Yeah.
And so that feels wrong, right? It's like, cause we're not even from the standpoint of, just from the standpoint of a brand and its customer. It's like, we're the customer, the advertiser, the customer of Facebook. And we all know, like, a good customer relationship allows for there to be communication, and you want the customer to be happy. It feels like
you're spending as much as you are. You feel like on the platform,
even if you're not, that should be the case. But if you are, you think that certainly is the case, and it's not, and it tends to not be the case lately. And I feel like I'm not sure. I can't think of another reason why that would be other than I know there's a resource shortage, but I also think that to some degree the platforms, maybe there's like an ego or something that has happened there. So whether or not that's true, I see some of these things, the Apple Facebook thing I know we're going to get into because I think it directly affects advertisers. But I think in all of these ways, I just think that it's healthy because it shows, it creates some level of competition actually, which means that these platforms, it balances that power. I don't want to like make it sound like I think platforms are bad. I don't. But I just think whether it's a platform or something else, I think when power's out of whack, I think these type of things help to balance that. And maybe, I imagine that, one of the things that falls out of the Apple and Facebook thing is I think if Facebook struggles a little bit, like any other company, you probably have to go back to serving your customers better. Right. And I think that naturally happens. And so I think that if that happens, that's a good thing ultimately for advertisers. But
so you feel like this is all like just growing pains. Like right now we're going through growing pains, but it's going to help move things forward. It's going to help innovate. It's going to bring.
I think it's going to be better. I do think it's going to be better. I don't know if it's growing pains, but I do think it's like birthing pains or something. Yeah.
I do think it's growing pains, but I think it's a figuring out of how we move forward as a species. And I know that sounds, I'm taking it to another level, but really think about, the internet's 20 years old, maybe, as far as access to the web. I know it's older than that, but as far as like public access. And so for the first time in the history of our species, we have complete access and democratization of all the information in the world, right? Anybody anywhere has access to all the information known to man for the most part. And we also have the public access of the distributed channels. So at some point, what these big corporations bet on is we can hire enough people and enough smarts with brains that we can stay above that knowledge level of technology. But at some point, the public has access to all that same knowledge, right? So at the point that those two start to meet and converge, I think you get this disruptions and this sandpaper where people are like, oh, you Wall Street have been in charge for 150 years and you think you can continue to do that? Well, guess what? We now have access in a way to turn that upside down. That we've never had that as people. There's always been a ruling class. There's always been someone who is higher up in ranks. There's class systems, access to knowledge. And I think we just are navigating these things and figuring them out. And ultimately they're going to be good. But who knew? Who knew that that the pandemic would happen, and as a result, we're all forced inside. And then who knew that movie theaters would release major releases in your homes, and theaters would struggle to be around, right? Who knew that? Who knew that? There was this little chat board called Reddit, and if enough people got together and said, "Let's flip Wall Street on its head," there was enough power to do it and ability and knowledge to do it. So these are things that I think are endemic of the technology and the space, but I think everyone's trying to just make their way through and figure out what does it mean. And, I think we're going to hit that again, and it's already starting to bubble up with electric cars and the automotive industry and clean energy and all that. What does that mean for, old corporations that have maintained control over our pocketbooks when it comes to who we pay our electric bills to and our lighting bills to and filling our cars up with gas? People are going, oh, now there's another way. What does that mean in the next 10, 15 years? So all of that to say, I think it's exciting times and it's going to be good, but I think these are going to continue to increase at a greater speed. And that's why I love the industry we're in, because, we can not only be involved in that, but help to think ahead and help serve people really ride that wave, because that's the great thing about it, right? It's like choppy seas can cause disruption and sinking, but it can also create great waves to surf on and have a great time and really benefit from it. So what do you guys think?
Well, I'm really perplexed with this whole Tim Cook Facebook thing, because for me, like I invite the privacy. Obviously, I think we all want privacy, but with our business, we know that without there's more privacy, there's less ways to target certain audiences, and with advertising. What do you guys think about that? Like, and how do you guys ride that fence just personally? Like, are you glad things are getting tightened down, even though your clients may see less conversions? It may actually hurt their business. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, I think that I have two sides of my mind. One is the consumer and one is the sort of entrepreneur. As a consumer, I can't say that I've been comfortable with where data has gone. The magic that Facebook does, where, again, I've looked it up. I have no physical evidence, but it's like you're talking about something you never talked about before, and it shows up as an ad. I don't know. I would say there's a discomfort there from a consumer point of view, and I think raising children into that, we've seen some of the mental challenges that are health issues related to social media. We've seen other issues related to social media. I think when you start to think about, oh wow, there's an algorithm that's feeding me. If I have a steady diet of this, there's a something that's giving me a certain perspective. It's not an objective perspective, right? Even if it's made for me, it's still not objective, right? And you start to perpetuate that. I just think overall, on the consumer side, I feel like that's not a positive to the population, in my opinion. But I do think there's a balance. I just think it's kind of out of whack. So from a consumer perspective, I'm like, yeah, I think there needs to be some. I don't believe in government reform of this stuff. I think there needs to be, good old competition, competitive reform of this, or I'd like to see that. On the advertising side, I don't know. I think that I do think it's going to ultimately be good. So we've talked about this in another episode. We talked about how marketing's changing, and that was before the whole Tim Cook and Mark Zuckerberg thing really came to a head. And we gave some practical ideas of like how we're addressing that. I think we're just kind of going a level deeper into this again. So, at the risk of repeating some of it, though, I think that it's ultimately going to be better. I think that, I think for agencies, especially because things got so easy, when you don't have to advertise and you just have to put an ad up and tell Facebook, I want people that go to the gym, and he just finds people that go to the gym. You don't have to hone your skills, and then and if it's working, you don't actually there's not a real need for a experienced professional in some people's minds in that equation. Maybe there isn't. And so when things get harder, I think that's where experience and skills have to come into play. And I think that's better for a few reasons. I think it's better for agencies in general, because I think there's going to be a need for people to figure stuff out. Earlier in the year, or actually mid last year, we were talking, I don't know if it was on the podcast or on the side, we were talking about, is there any innovation left? Bob, we were 15 years ago or whatever, it was like we were on the frontier figuring stuff out when it came to all this stuff. And it was exciting, but it was also difficult, and not everyone could do it. And now, we go in cycles, right? And this is not a bad thing, right? So it gets easy. And earlier last year, we were talking, is there even any innovation left right now? Like what is it? And, little do we know, here we go. Like, I think it's coming back around now. I think there's a reason for people to, it's going to be harder to advertise the same way we did, because data most likely will get smaller. But I mean, it doesn't make it impossible. I think it's going to be better in some ways, because look, that difficulty reduces competition on these platforms, reduces noise, makes it harder to get results, which means the people that figure it out, there's a reward for doing that. And I think the best people that are set up to figure it out are people that really understand and are interested in going after that and honing that skill. So I think there's going to be some benefit there. I mean, practically speaking, if you can't track everything, then really it comes back to kind of a little bit old school. I think we're literally looking at, tracking with landing pages and coupon codes and some of these kind of things, but that's not, that doesn't not work,
Exactly.
So
I would say in all of this that you're absolutely right, Ken. You're spot on with the innovation. I think there's we're entering a kind of maybe a phase 2 of the internet, 3, maybe depending on how you count it.
Are we in Web 2.0 or 3.0?
Yeah, I think we're Web 3.0, 4.0, who knows? Depending on what you're developing, right? But to Brad's point on the privacy issue, it's no doubt. I mean, I use Siri. All 3 of you use Siri. I have Google Home. You guys might have Alexa. Basically, they're sitting there listening, waiting for us to say the word, "Hey Google" or "Hey Siri," right? So it's always on listening. Otherwise, they couldn't hear those words. So it's monitoring. So at some level, we're all being monitored. That's the price we choose to pay for this convenience. I don't think you can exist and use any of this technology in 2021 without paying that price. So I think for me, as all 3 of us, we're Apple fans. And one of the reasons I think is because of their security and because of their high level of expectation on that. Now, what they do with that data, that's another discussion. But if you've ever gone on to, someone's phone who has Android and there's great solutions for that, but then go into the Google App Store, it's like a pirate place, as compared to, say, the Apple Store, which isn't perfect by any means, but there's a high level for those of us who've created apps for both platforms. It's much easier to get something in to the Google Store, Android, all that, than the Apple, because there's a high level of expertise and security, and says you've got to play by these rules because we want to create the best, safest, secure environment for the people that are using and purchasing from our platform. So having said that, I think that's really what we're seeing is a clash of philosophies, a clash of Apple and their philosophy of we're going to own, tighten up, control the platform. We're going to own it. And, Zuckerberg and Google saying, yeah, but you know what? There's a value in public discourse, democratization, more open source, blah, 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 which both have very valid points and errors on both sides. But I think you're really seeing a clash of philosophy on one level. What do you guys think of that?
And a clash of businesses, most likely, right? Because, Apple's not monetizing that we know of, at least not primarily monetizing data from people. And Google and Facebook, they make billions of dollars monetizing that data. And so, I'm sure taking $1 billion off their bottom line is a nice side effect of the philosophical privacy thing for Apple, I would imagine, but I don't know. But I think that, hey, that's the marketplace. That's the beauty of free market, right? Is like people can choose. And people choose with their money, and that's kind of how how this goes. I do like Apple for those reasons. I don't think that I'm not naive enough to think that that's 100% pure on their part. And I've been disappointed in a little bit with Apple because they were going to go full for anyone that kind of follows this stuff, they have end-to-end encryption on, which is good for all their messaging and that kind of stuff. But like their backups don't, and they were going to, and they decided not to, because supposedly the FBI told them, no, we want to be able to access those if we need to. Anyway, I don't know if that's true or not, but I've read those things. But they did stop. They did decide, hey, we're not going to make certain areas fully private. And that is official. They kind of like had plans and they backed out of those plans. And so I don't know.
It's interesting. A little soft. We talk about you talk about like dependencies and how to diversify yourself in business to mitigate risk. But if you look at our dependencies, it's kind of it's just a chain, right? Mm-hmm. It's like we're dependent upon Facebook, and they can do whatever they want to shut us down. I mean, literally, they shut your ad account down for no reason. You're stuck in the water, and you're right. But then they're dependent upon Apple mm-hmm. and Google. So now they're, if Apple comes in and decides to do something, they're dependent upon that. And then the government, Apple's dependent on the government, right? Mm-hmm. So it just kind of goes up the chain to the point.
And supposedly the government's dependent on the people. Yeah, exactly. But the vote's still out on that one.
Yeah, so are we at the top of the food chain or are we at the bottom? That's the question, right?
It's really your perspective. I choose to believe we're at the top.
Yeah, I like to be on the top, but I don't know. I feel sometimes I'm at the very bottom.
Yeah, but I think it's dependent on the day, most likely.
Yeah. So I'm 100% with you.
Depending on how much money you lost on Robinhood.
Yeah.
Exactly. I've me, I'm all over the board with this, but I do believe that I think there's a technology that we haven't started to use yet, and I know I'm kind of a poster child in this area, is really, I think the blockchain is going to be the next step of innovation that will be integrated. And that at that point, you will become to a point where we are very decentralized. We know that with cryptocurrency, with Bitcoin, where there's we will have more control. But there's a lot of companies coming out. Like there's a pay company that's coming out called Humble. I don't know if you've heard of them. And it's like a trading platform. So it's like you're going to be able to buy and sell, but it's also like a currency. And it's called Humble. It's like a cash app. And it'll be the first cash app that runs on the blockchain, and it's a worldwide cash app. So they're trying to make it so that they've raised billions of dollars, and they're over the counter right now. But I think they're going to go on the New York Stock Exchange in maybe even a few months once they hit $1. But
and you look at that kind of stuff, and I think that's really exciting. But then at the same time,
well, social media.
There's no perfect decision, right? Like. Everything being decentralized comes with its own problems too, right? So you gotta have to have a little of both, and you have to be aware of those, because everything's decentralized means, hey, there's no one that you can come to and say, hey, this didn't work, give me my money back. Exactly. And it also means it's the Wild West a little bit, and so that's kind of has its own scary challenges and those kind of things. So the older I get, the more I believe that there's more I see the truth in. There is no perfect option, and you just have to kind of be, aware of that, and don't jump fences real fast, right? The grass is always greener on the other side, kind of thing, and just kind of like move forward and try and have a healthy balance of all these different things.
So for you guys, like, we run Facebook ads, and we understand that with some of our clients, because you might know more about this, Bob and Ken, than I do, but like the attribution time frame is being limited through Apple now, and so it's going to make a difference in our conversions as far as what we're able to measure, not maybe what we're actually getting, but what we're able to measure. And it may change some of our data, our sales data, or our financial data. How are you guys handling that with your clients? Like, how are you talking to them when there's changes on platforms that you can't control, to the point where it's like it looks like it hits their bottom line, or it could hit their bottom line?
Probably does.
I think a lot of clients aren't even aware of it. And for me, I try to be as transparent and educate them as much as possible, and be the source of that knowledge. So because, they're not most clients aren't watching and going, oh, iOS 14, you need to go into your Google account and update, reset the tags, everything that needs to be done on that just came out. They're looking for us to do that. So I think the more that we can have those teachable moments to sit down with a client or update and say, oh, by the way, this is what's happening and it could affect your bottom line. We're on top of it. I think that builds trust. It goes back to this whole customer relationship thing. And I think that's one of the things that we try to do. But I also think too, and I've said this, there is so many other platforms besides Facebook and Google. We've got to start presenting those to the client and showing them how that can be used to not only duplicate, but possibly increase their conversions. And it forces us, we have to get out of our boxes and our comfort levels. And, it's easy to sell Facebook and Google. It's harder to learn new platforms. But just like we're seeing with all this stuff, it could go away like that. And maybe it's not. Maybe they'll both be around for another 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years. Who knows? But it could change.
Yeah, I know we're talking a lot about obviously marketing tactics but not all of it, but right now, I think this affects agencies of all types too, because I think it changes where the emphasis might be, all where the other roles of whether it's branding or the actual site or design, I think those roles are adjusted, when something like this changes. And so I think it's relevant for everyone, by the way, but I would say look, we all know that ROAS and kind of the easy dollars on Facebook have been declining over the last couple of years. And so I would say in general, and so I think a lot of people that we talk to, obviously we're in e-commerce, like most people are aware of that. And we encourage all the brands that we work with and ourselves to be diversifying, to be not 100% reliant on just Facebook as a channel. I would say with e-commerce brands, it's pretty typical that almost all their new dollars or new customer acquisition comes from Facebook advertising. That's just kind of generalization, but that tends to be accurate. So I think they've kind of been, a lot of people have been aware of that decline. So the good part about that is this is not just a cliff, but it's just sort of another thing that is happening in this decline. But look, at the end of the day, we've got my son here racing cars. I don't know if you can hear that in the background. But at the end of the day, I think that, look, Facebook has billions of dollars dependent on this. So they're going to do everything in their power to innovate as much as possible. So there's that happening, I believe. And then I think that the other side of it is, I think to Bob's point, we need to diversify platforms. That means, I think this is really important, that means breaking our addiction to immediate ROAS, return on investment. And that has been the hardest thing. When I coach people or even for ourselves, like this idea that, wait, I have to spend $1 and I'm not going to make $2 immediately. No, I'm out. Like that has been, there's been this mentality that advertising is a magic slot machine. I'm not saying everyone has it, but there's been, and it's not even to their fault because it has kind of been to some degree. I think that is critical we have to break our addiction to the immediate return on investment so that we can go ahead and say, hey, we're going to invest in some of these other platforms. We're going to try this other thing. We're going to try whatever, a podcast advertising. We're going to try a video ad on YouTube or Hulu or maybe even TV advertising, radio, those kind of things, where we don't get immediate return, and we may not get a return at all, right? It may be a fail, but at least we tried it, or we may have to figure it out over time. I think that mentality, that mindset, I think is going to be the most challenging, and I found to be the most challenging to change, because I think that is the prerequisite to actually figuring this out. Is like we have to be of the mindset that, hey, we're gonna invest in our marketing to figure out how we actually diversify, how we find pockets that work for us that may not work for everyone else. And I think that the last thing is, in my opinion, we're we're putting a great emphasis on owned data. So like the data that is, like your CRM and like your email channels and, more than just email, by the way, but like I mentioned CRM, like that kind of stuff. Like, how do you connect the dots on your side, right? If you can't get pure tracking through Facebook and attribution, all that kind of stuff, how do you get more intelligent with what you do have, right? You have website data, you've got CRM data from people that bought and subscribed and those kind of things. You can, Facebook they do it well, but their algorithms just analyze that same type of data, right? And come up with, hey, this person's most likely to do this, right? I think that we'll see those platforms get better at that. And I think that for us, we need to figure out ways to be intelligent about the data that we do have. So, hey, these type of people that subscribe to this generally do this other activity. Okay, so we're going to go after that and move it on. I don't know if you can hear that. I apologize.
Are you playing cars again, Ken?
I'm playing. I'm the podcasting dad today.
All right.
My wife's out this morning, so I'm back with my kids, and they're small enough to where they're like, "Yeah, no problem, we won't come in," and then they come in innocently, and they start playing.
That's fine.
That's awesome.
But anyway, that's the kind of, I think that those shifts to like owning and kind of being of the mindset of investing in channels, I think that has to happen. And you're seeing really cool channels like we haven't seen great results out of it, but Hulu and Netflix and some of these like streaming platforms now are getting sort of
self-managed,
easier to self-manage those.
And it seems like there's an opportunity for new social platforms during like this disruptive waves, right? We saw Parler come and go, but I think that was just people starting to say, hey, maybe we want something different. But now we're seeing Clubhouse, which seems to be taking off. I've been in it. It's a really cool environment, totally different than the other platforms. But, the success of Discord amongst, the geeky tech types, the gamers, the Redditors, has proven and been around now for years. And I would argue that Clubhouse is a more sophisticated version of that for the masses. And so that's one to keep an eye on. I think we're going to see more and more segmentation of social platforms versus, 3 billion people on one platform. I think we'll see that there's an opportunity now for, 10 million on one, 500 million on another, and then very smaller segments, just because people have access to the tech and it's caught up with the everyday person.
That's good.
Yeah, we never, 2-3 years ago, I was trying to figure out like how could anyone ever compete with Facebook, right? If you're a social media platform, that kind of thing. And then just inevitably, they couldn't, but inevitably everything's cyclical, right? And something does happen to make that available, or at least to disrupt it and give opportunity.
And it's as much a psychological change as a technology change, right? It's a psychological change in the species, right? It's like, there's only Facebook. I'm not going to change my habits. Don't try to give me something else that doesn't work as good. That's all I'm going to do. Then you got politics and money and Wall Street and everything. It's like everybody's like, oh, maybe I should try other platforms. So for whatever reason, that psychological shift is important to keep an eye on too, because that fits right into what we do with our marketing, our messages, our platforms we use, et cetera. So I think it's just as much as a technology shift. It's also a sociological and psychological shift that people are like, okay, now I'm open to trying other things. Where in the past, this works great. There's only 2 big gorillas. I'm not going to do anything else. Why would I? But now I think people are shifting and changing and going, I don't have to plop down $50 every time I go see a movie with my wife. Now I can do it differently. And so
there's a good lesson
we need to
there.
Exploit those opportunities in positive ways.
Right. There's a good lesson there, because I think a big part of business is being ready, like waiting and being ready. Right. Like if we all saw these in and in even subcultures, we see these, like, where social media platforms, I know we're just as an example, would pop up trying to just be the better Facebook, or the Facebook for these people, or something like that. And it wasn't, I didn't notice any of them take off, and maybe because it wasn't really the right time. But in any business scenario, and even like you think about sports, it's the same kind of thing. It's like, you've got to be ready and waiting, because when disruption or a mess up happens, I don't mean that meaning that that's a good thing that, people get hurt. But when something happens, right? See that in like a football game or something like that, when someone drops the ball or there's a bad pass, like, that is the opportunity to shift the momentum and to enter that. I think business is that same kind of thing. I think in a lot of ways, life is that same kind of thing. And that's why when I look at, I've sort of been taught and conditioned to the idea that when these things happen, this is how opportunity is made. Like, this is how wealth is built. Wealth is built in winters. That's what a lot of people say. And I believe that, right? And so when everyone's freaking out, if you're ready and waiting, you're able to actually kind of capitalize on those opportunities. I don't mean that from like some people don't like that idea, but it's not capitalizing on the misfortunes of others. It's just, when opportunity arises, you're able to step in and present a solution. And that's usually the smartest time to kind of do something like what we're talking about.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
These growing pains are good. That's what we talked about, right? And during these times, I know it's like this news with the Reddit folks. It's empowering. At the same time, it's like, oh no, it's a little nerve-wracking, because we don't know what it's going to do, right? But I think these growing pains are good. We talked about diversification, that we need to think out of the box a little bit with our clients. We need to explore maybe some other channels that we haven't explored, just so that we can diversify and not put all of our eggs in one basket. Those are some really great ideas that we've talked about in the past, and yeah, we'll see what happens today with the stock market. I know it's going to be kind of a wild ride for the next week or so, yeah.
You enjoy California with your daughter, and stay as long as you want, because it's nice and cold, and a nice little soft layer of ice and snow here. So enjoy it while you can.
Hopefully you can get back.
27. Yeah, I'll be able to get back. Yeah.
Well, all right, cool, guys. Until next time.
Yeah. Good discussion. We'll talk to you guys.
Good.
We'll see you back in Franklin.
See you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.